Ladies and gentlemen, I am delighted to welcome. How will I introduce our guest here? I'm afraid to use the word Diane because he's far too young and far too good looking to maybe be called a Diane. But we are joined today. It's been 2 years into making this interview, Mr. Chris Lahiji from LD Micro. For anybody who doesn't know Chris, he's been around the US microcap space for 20 years. What he doesn't know about the US microcap space isn't worth knowing, probably in my opinion. And I'm delighted we finally got this together. Chris, welcome to Coffee Microcaps.
Mark, it is an absolute pleasure. I'm sorry it took nearly 800 days. And I got to tell you, 20 years in microcap is like 200 years in any other industry. So if you take the microcap to watchmaking conversion and you kind of put it in, it feels like almost 200 years of me doing this. But again, it is a pleasure. And I just want to let everyone know, I'm not doing this to promote Alkaline 88. It's my favorite water and I get dehydrated very quickly. So if you see me do this, I hope I'm not being disrespectful. It's just that I want to enunciate my words properly. And with that, I have to drink.
Okay, no problem. We'll go with the subliminal sponsorship messaging.
Oh, hell yeah, dude. Yeah, no.
For anybody who I guess maybe is not familiar with you and LD Micro, maybe just a bit of background to you and talk us through LD Micro, the conferences, the index, more recently, what's happening now with SRAX, all of that.
So I don't want to bore your listeners, so I will be brief as far as my personal history. When I go and speak at colleges or other events, I always start out by saying that I feel very blessed. I feel very fortunate. I was one of the lucky few that knew what I wanted to do very early in life. And my first dream was to become a professional tennis player. I got to the college level. I had some success there, but two things. I wasn't mentally, I didn't have the mental gifts, which, as you know, in professional sports, a lot of it is mental. And my body kind of broke down. And when you add those two, I had to go with my second love, which was small company investments. And I left school early. I left at 18, and I started professionally in November of 2002. And it will be 20 years next year, where I wrote a book called The Best Companies No One's Ever Heard of. The book was part of a documentary that I was writing on small businesses in the country and how they did not get any love from the financial media. And let me tell you, Mark, it has only gotten worse in the last 20 years in terms of what financial media covers and what they don't. And I don't care if you decide to put this in, but most of the powers that be in the country, in the US, don't give a shit about small businesses. They don't. Actions always speak louder than words. And I feel that because money has been basically pouring in to all our politicians since Eisenhower. So there's no surprise there. What's happened is what was predicted. But for me, microcap investing is investing in good small companies that can go on to do much bigger things, hire many more people, generate influence, create products and services that people love, and make society in general better. So I'm a very pro-business guy. I'm very pro-capitalist. I think some of the greatest things that we have on planet Earth were essentially corporate interests from the beginning. But I've always had a love for microcap because I love buying things that not many people are interested in, or I love buying things that are not mainstream. And luckily, in the last 2 decades, I've had some success in this department of buying things that go on to be much, much bigger. But for me, the real pleasure is going to a company where you own 1% of at a $40, $50 million valuation and seeing that company be worth 4, 5, 6, 10, 15, $20 billion. That's the real satisfaction that I get. And you can't buy that feeling. which is why after all these years, I'm still doing what I'm doing.
Okay. And
Oh, you asked
maybe,
about
yeah,
LD Micro.
yeah, maybe
So
just give
LD
people
Micro,
an overview of LD Micro.
LD Micro started in '06. It was two guys, and very few people know who the D in LD Micro is. And I keep it a kind of, I don't want to say a closely guarded secret. It's not like Coca-Cola's formula or what KFC does with their chicken, but there's probably less than 20 or 25 people that know who the D and LD Micro is. And I still think he is the best microcap investor of all time. And I'll put him up against all the big guys today, like the Connor Haley's, the Ian Castles, the Quote the Raven, all the guys that are top-notch investors. I still don't think they hold a candle to this guy because of his track record. But what happened is that he had a medical issue, and he couldn't do all the things that I did. So when I look back at that time in our history, think about literally a company that the only real thing that we had was a newsletter. And what made the newsletter special is that we weren't paid by companies to write on them. And there were companies that we owned personally. And there's some of it is still in circulation. I want to say that we did pretty well, and we did. But it was started as a newsletter. And what we quickly found out is that there was really no money in newsletters unless you did it at a very, very large scale. So what we decided to do is basically do the one thing that we didn't like doing, which is go to conferences. Everything that I've ever done in my life is predicated on just me not being happy and thinking that I can do something better. The other rule that I have that I follow in my life is I'm not going to do anything unless I feel that I could be the world's best at. So this next chapter that you'll see in 2022, when we ultimately launch it, I feel that we will have the best product on earth when we launch it. I wouldn't do it if I didn't think so. Do I think that LD Micro is the best physical conference in the world? In microcap, yes. But in small cap and mid cap and large cap, there are also great conferences. But that was our point of frustration. And it took me 12 years until I can say this publicly, because I have the track record, or we have the track record to prove it. But for me, it was conferences, because I've been to funerals that were more exciting than most conferences. And you know as well as I do that it's the people that make the event. So when you get a lot of pissed off wealthy people wearing vests and khakis, you're going to have a miserable experience. So our secret is the variation that we have with the people that we invite. Our secret is we don't let most people in. And I feel that combo of private investors, institutional investors, analysts, retirees, even aspects of the sell side have made LD something very, very special. So of course, my timing is always bad with all launches. We had our first event April 28, 2008, right before the recession. Mm-hmm. But what happened is that people were just so genuinely happy that we had to do another one. So the secret is, the reason we left the April date to go to December is that I got married in April of the next year. And I didn't have a job. Newsletter, the newsletter business is the newsletter business. We had that. And I decided just to kind of go into conferences all in. That December of 2009 event, obviously, it was brutality. Mm-hmm. But again, people still had a good time. And then, of course, 10, 11, 12, it was a phenomenon. The index was launched. And I want to say this. People always ask me, do you think are you happy at your events? The answer is no, because we're running the show. It's a miserable experience for the operator. My favorite conference of all time was March of 2009, It is now known as Edgewater. Dave Levine, huge shout out, doesn't get the props that he deserves. He is truly a microcap legend. All these guys were hit by 70, 80%. I had a few $1,000,000. It basically got crushed to the hundreds of thousands. But I remember going to that conference and having a great time. And in the end, it's people that make the difference. So the stance is, LD is now, I want to say, one of the more prominent conferences in microcap. I want to say that the biggest accomplishment we've ever had as an organization is hosting a conference a couple months ago, back in October, which was a Herculean task. Big props to Three Part and Laura Garant, who is also having an event in the next few days. I feel that physical conferences should take place as long as people use common sense and there's necessary and some safety protocols. But I wanted to say, we pivoted in 15. We launched the LD Micro Index, and the reason I launched the LD Micro Index is because I couldn't get an accurate measurement for anything that was trading less than $500 million. And I was like, this is frustrated. We spent a couple $100,000 doing it, getting the personnel to do it. And now I feel that it is the most accurate measurement in the microcap space. And I'll go up against anybody. As everyone knows, the universe is getting smaller. So, you have kind of our big brother, Russell, kind of coming in and squeezing the living crap out of us. I don't care. They can squish us. We're not going to deviate from the mechanisms that we use to have companies in the index, which is all quantitative from the beginning. So I feel that that's gotten a lot of traction. Thousands of people, tens of thousands of times per day, people type in LD Micro. They check what the index is doing. That makes us very proud. And of course, next year, something will be launched that will essentially be what I think as my legacy. And it distends the microcap world, because I feel that unless somebody comes up and performs brilliantly, they're never going to give anyone under 2 billion any credit. So if that means me doing something that's a little bit out of my comfort zone, so be it, because we've always been pro-industry. Even though there's a lot of charlatans, even though there's a lot of disingenuous people, even though there's a lot of bad people. But there's bad people in small cap, there's bad people in mid cap, and there's bad people in large cap. So it comes with the territory. So that's kind of LD in a nutshell. The index, the website, the conferences. We want to be a resource for everybody, regardless of whether they use the index, regardless of whether they come to the conference, regardless if anyone reads, my musings every now and then. I just want the industry to be in a stronger position than when we found it back in 2002.
That's a kind of, I think, of a nice segue, when you talk about the index there being, a temperature check or a reliable indicator of where, the market is at the minute. So maybe for people, Australia based, where is the US microcap right now? Is things feeling toppy to you? Does the index look toppy? Are we kind of fair value? Actually, it's looking cheaper than has done in a while, and maybe like in this kind of weird period where we're at the end of 2021, let's say the end of COVID, fingers crossed, moving into 2022, is there kind of any themes emerging out of this last 18 months that, you think are going to be a feature for the next year ahead?
So for all your listeners, and for you too, Mark, I have been wrong on the macro picture for the last 2 decades, okay? If you've been wrong consistently for 1 decade, that's one thing. But if you've been wrong for 2 decades, I cannot voice an opinion of all the things that I say. And let me kind of tell you this, because I think it's very important. I grew up very normally, okay? We were middle class, okay? Maybe borderline lower middle class. how can I put this? We were very happy with what we had. We're normal people, okay? We did normal things. We would save money. We couldn't go to expensive restaurants because we couldn't afford it. You know, we would wait until we accumulate things. I mean, it's a very Asian thing. So when I see private equity buying a company with less than 1% down for bullshit valuations, it makes me want it makes me want to run for cover. But if you look at private equity, they've crushed it. They've made more money than anybody. So I'm how can I put this? It's hard for me to give you any consensus because I've been wrong for 20 damn years. Now, for microcap, when COVID happened, this is the insight that I could share with all with everyone today. When COVID happened, every guy over 40 years of age basically freaked the you know what out, okay? Sold everything and said, okay, this is gonna, let's, grab the popcorn, this is gonna be bad. All the young guys, because they hadn't seen anything like this before, they haven't seen a real correction, a real crash. All the young guys are like, this is a buying opportunity of a lifetime. The Fed comes in, okay, never fight the Fed. I've learned that. I have the scars to show that. Fed comes in, increases money supply by, it's not even a historical sum. It's like some ridiculous number. Crypto takes off, which again, it's like the number one question I get, do you own crypto? And the answer is no, because I'm still I get it. It's going to be with us. There is going to be, there's definitely going to be digital currency, no doubt. I don't know how it shapes up, but I feel that the last, post-COVID, March 2020 till now, has been some of the most insane things that I've ever seen in my career. Someone told me that 30 million accounts were created, stock accounts, since March of 2020. And most of those people are under 35. And I feel a lot of them came into the microcap world expecting huge returns, huge volatility. And that's, as you and I know, that's not the norm. So what has happened in 2021? Well, things have come back a little bit back to normal in the sense that, you don't have a stock that trades 1 billion shares in one day that trades 50,000 shares on average for the last 5 years. I'm looking at you, Gevo, Gevo. You don't have things that go from 3 to 30 in a day back to 3 at the close. So I feel that, and what's happened is that the timeline for investors historically has shrunken over time, where long-term used to be 5 years. Now, for some people, it's 5 days. So if they're not seeing action, they're selling the companies. And that's caused a lot of companies in the microcap space, most notably in medtech and biotech, really outside of energy and minerals. A lot of things have gotten thrashed because there is no excitement. Tiny beans, my top idea for Bard's annual competition, which I have won 2 years. It's a big deal for me. I have to thump my chest. I won it 2 years ago. It was a big deal for me. It was somebody else's idea. Shout out to Darren Evans. Okay, Cardiff. It went from like 1 to 20, but the stance is Tiny Beans was my top idea, and it's down 60% because there's not a lot of liquidity in the company. For full disclosure, I own it. There's not a lot of liquidity in the company. And who wants to buy, a company in the online space that's going up against Google and Facebook and, all the and Apple and all these huge companies? But if you ask me, my personal opinion is it's probably one of the most undervalued companies in all the microcap world. And of course, its main listing is in the ASX.
Yeah. Exactly. It's one of those ones where, you've seen it, I've seen it, numerous times. It's like heat goes out of the general market, and there's no regard for the underlying fundamentals of kind of any of the kind of stocks in your portfolio. It's just like the heat just goes out, and then everything just like deflates.
It's all action, Mark. People want action. And in the words of Mike Barish, who will go down as one of the greatest small cap investors of all time, and I consider Mike a mentor of mine, even though we would talk at conferences casually and see each other in Denver every now and then. But Mike is, I was 25 or 26 when he told me, and he told me, I know a lot of what, the man has crushed it over the last half century. He says, Chris, I know a lot of wealthy investors, but I don't know a lot of wealthy traders. And not to say that you can't make a killing trading, you can. But when he told me that, things made a lot of sense. When you kind of break down the D and LD Micro's investment strategy, he started with nothing. He started with like $8,000 that I think is millions upon millions of dollars today. I don't know for sure, but it's all predicated on buying stuff and forget that you own it. So when I do this in my portfolio, I don't buy, here's the one thing that will probably be made public that I've never announced publicly. Microcaps are not a majority of my wealth. They're only a percentage of my wealth. Now, my wealth has risen over the years, in a nice way, but it's always a percentage of the overall composite. If you look at my microcap wealth, it's probably a third, maybe about 40% of my net worth. But I've always kept it as such because what we do is very risky. Because a tiny beans can go down 50, 60% on 100,000 shares. My largest personal holding is obviously SRAX. I own roughly 6.5 or 7% of the company. But when you think that every penny cost me 160 grand, whether it goes up or goes down, you can lose your mind over these things, which is why you buy things to the point where whatever the number is, whatever the amount is that you're comfortable, and you forget that you own it, And if you do this full-time professionally, obviously your risk tolerance is different. But for a lot of people who casually play it, the biggest money is the guys that buy stuff that they like, that they hold for long periods of time, that have, that they can prove that it's worth more than the sum of the parts, and they hold it. Which, honestly, the only reason I'm still doing this interview is because I'm a bad seller. Okay, I wouldn't be doing this interview if I was a good seller, and that would mean keeping the big winners that we've had over the years. But again, everyone's tolerance is different.
No, exactly. And I think, you found, I guess, Tiny Beans, I don't know if it was through the ASX first up or because they now have the OTC markets listing, and I think they're actually uplisting to the NASDAQ, if I remember correctly, their announcements. But, if you're sitting in Sydney or Melbourne now and you're thinking, okay, I want to start looking at the US market. So we've got LD Micro as kind of a starting point, but general advice for anybody like coming to look at the US market for the first time and not fall into a few bear pits.
First off, I got to say this, huge shout out to the Australians as a collective people. They are some of the nicest, toughest people I've ever met in my life. The smartest person ever to work for LD is an Australian. Okay. So Conrad, if you're watching this, you say, I don't give you enough credit. I do. Okay. Brilliant. Just like Connor, just a different level of comprehension. So I think the Aussies have something really good with the ASX. Okay. It's just like the Canadians have something really good with the TSX. So my stance is know your backyard and know your neighborhood, but also know that there is a universe within the OTC, the NASDAQ, the NYSE, the London Stock Exchange. So I always like to put things, if I was Australian, okay, that would be awesome. First of all, that would be awesome if I was Australian. I think I'd get a lot more interest, if I was Australian and I was either in Perth or Sydney or Melbourne, I would allocate probably half my time to the ASX and half my time to the general world. But you guys have a much more global view because you don't have a choice. And I think that's what gives the Australians an advantage. The Americans, and I speak for myself, we think we are the world, okay, for the most part, which is also part of our demise because, as you know, the globe is a very large place. So that's kind of my stance. There's a lot of great, solid ASX companies out there, and there's a lot of really good companies that have come public that are American on the ASX because it just makes more sense for them financially. So my stance is, just as a people in general, don't change what's made you successful. But that's kind of my basis. If we are the Vegas of the world when it comes to markets. As in, I'm sure you guys could probably go to some Asian country. I don't know if gambling is legal in Australia. My apologies, but
Oh yeah,
I'm
no,
sure
it's massively legal.
Oh, massively legal. Okay, but I promise you, you don't have anything that matches the strip. You don't.
No, no.
Nobody does. That's why the strip is the strip. So that's kind of my stance. Respect your market because it's a good one, but also keep your eyes peeled on other things. But the cool thing is, you guys can look at Asia. You guys can look at Europe. You can look at Africa and South America a lot more than we can because we're just, the world for us is the OT. It's like, if it's not relevant, it's not in North America. And that's a wrong mindset to take.
And
I honestly hope I answered that question. I don't even remember.
Anyway, we even if we went a bit tangential there, it's good because the tangent leads on to kind of my next thing, which is, I guess, the shift in that mindset from US investors. And we talked about it off air before we started, but so people would probably be familiar with Connor Haley, as I refer to him in Australia. He's like the current big dog of US microcap investing. But he put out a paper last August that he did with his summer interns, and looking at all the kind of microcap baggers outside, I think it was outside of the US. So whether it's in Sweden or South Korea or the UK or Australia. And when you go through the whole presentation, it's a pretty in-depth presentation. I think it went to like 700 slides or something. But
I got to tell you, if I ever see Connor again, I'm going to choke his ass out because that is literally the only paper I've ever read that has caused me to cry professionally. Because most of the stuff that he talked about are things that we owned. And again, Connor, as we spoke privately, Connor's level of comprehension is unmatched. And I feel truly that he is indeed worth the hype. So what he wrote on, well, I'm assuming it's the same thing we're talking about. What it was, all the ingredients of a multi-bagger. Was that it?
Yeah, multi-bagger. But the piece that kind of caught kind of my attention, and I think a lot of people who follow Connor in the US, he called out Australia as one of those markets that performed better than he would have expected. The data would suggest, X was the answer, but actually Y was the answer. And I know personally myself, as I was saying off air, the inbound inquiry I've got from US investors wanting to know more about the ASX microcap. Obviously, they like Google ASX microcaps and kind of coffee microcaps comes up in the search results somewhere, or they find the YouTube channel or whatever. That has been noticeable for me in the last, since he done, so let's say the last 15 months or so. So to your earlier point, about, people being in the US very inward looking, just looking at US stuff, I kind of feel that is changing, that they are starting to look. I don't know if that's because it's an evolution of people as they invest, and valuations maybe in the US.
I'll tell you what it is. And I know your audience, I know Connor is watching. Answer your damn email, Connor. That's what. I only send you 3 emails a year. Make sure you answer it. So I'll tell you why I think Australia fared a lot better. And huge kudos to Connor for mentioning this because his research truly is second to none. But I think it's because the Australians as a people are just more rational, okay? They're more common sense. They're more work oriented. The Americans are more, cash and trash and flash and ostentation and Look at this Louis Vuitton handbag. Who gives a shit? Is it a real company? Does it generate real revenues? Will there be an audience for it? Many companies should not be public. They shouldn't. They need to raise money. Most companies, as you know, in microcap, I think it's like 85 or 90% don't make any money. The Australians are more fundamental people. They go public when they know that they can make money. They go public when they can see the writing on the wall. It's less speculative in nature. It's more tangible. And you need that. You need that in a market, because in the end, no one's going to give a damn about microcap anywhere in the world unless they can make money. So that I just feel that there's much more balance with the Australians, and there's much more balance with the Canadians, as a people, as a government, as a society, and that allows less volatility. The U.S. is the casino, okay? Just God only knows what. I mean, let's just look at all the cryptocurrencies that people are buying that are going to be worth exactly this. I'm not saying that about Bitcoin or Ethereum or blockchain, but there's going to be a lot of these, a ton. So look, you and I have been around the block to know that this stuff always ends badly. Try to deal with people that are more rational, are more prudent, and have a drink every now and then. That's kind of my basis. But I'm not surprised that Australia has done well. And even we're looking, I mean, with Tiny Beans, we're looking at, we're looking at your continent with more interest as well.
Yeah, no, I think it's definitely something I've noticed, and I think it's going to be a trend that will continue over the next decade, as we kind of said off air as well. I feel this coming decade is going to be the internationalization of microcap investing, where now people have a microcap portfolio, whether it's 100% of their wealth or 30 or 40, whatever, but it's very domestically focused, whether you're based in Sydney or you're based in Atlanta or you're based in Manchester. But I think by the time we get to 2030, that microcap portfolio is going to have a fair smattering of international names, and they can be listed anywhere, whether it's the US, it's New Zealand, it's Australia, it's Sweden, it's Germany, it doesn't matter. But I truly believe by the time we get to 2030, and with, you talk about the 35 million accounts that have been opened up, interactive brokers, you sign up, bang, you've got like whatever they have, 16 or 20 something markets, and it's as easy to buy, Tiny Beans in Australia as it is to like buy it in the US.
You're 100% right. And my final thought on all this is that I feel that microcap's going to get a lot bigger if the market's correct.
No.
It's kind of a weird feeling that you see all these 500 million, billion 5 companies that are now technically microcaps. So look, my stance is, if I could summarize my career investing, keep an open mind, be patient, okay, and use common sense as your guide. Trust me, it saved me a lot of grief over these last 20 to 25 years of investing.
And then if we look a bit to 2022, if travel is now opening up in Australia, let's hope it keeps going that way. Are we going to be back to, main event, LD Micro Invitational?
Yes.
Give people a timeline of when those two big conferences normally happen.
2022, we expect a full schedule. Whether Octagon or Omnicron or Lambada, I don't know, man. I mean, at this point, humans have had 2 years of this shit. COVID is significant. COVID is real. We need to use common sense. We need to have safety protocols, but LD will have a full slate of physical events next year, assuming that this doesn't mutate into smallpox or something like that, which I said earlier. But my stance is we will be open for business.
So just for people who are not familiar with the timelines, when are the two dates?
I don't know.
Roughly, with June and December, I think is normally.
Historically, but I don't know next year. I don't know.
Okay, well,
so
they'll have to sign up to a newsletter.
Yes, but when I don't know, no one knows. So that's the stance, though. But we expect a full schedule, and I'll tune into something. We will do a Chicago conference for the first time. Okay. Chicago, yeah. I know it's, I feel that out of all the cities on planet Earth, we are the most connected to the city of Chicago. Not New York, not LA, not SF, Chicago. It's kind of weird. Weird how that worked.
And we'll look forward to this other big project that's going to go live in 2022 as well. And the conference is up and running. Now, for people who've been to my conference, which is a small one-day event to 120 people, 12 companies, Chris's events are, just give somebody like your last normal conference, what was the kind of, companies attending, people attending?
Yeah, it was 300 companies, close to 300, 4,000 one-on-ones, about 1,300 people total. And I will tell everyone, it will take us a few years until we get back to that. So, I think the future conferences are smaller in nature.
Yeah, but I think just to kind of give people an idea, if you want to dive head first into the US microcap arena and community and get a good overall flavor, I think attending an LD microcap conference will definitely fast track you up or down the knowledge curve.
So yes, and there was one Australian, shout out to Wesley, who would come every single event and make that trip from Australia, and said that it was worth every minute of that plane ride. So I think Wesley's kind of crazy, but again, we have a global audience, and again, based off my history with Australians, you are more than welcome.
Okay, Chris Lahiji from LD Micro, thank you so much for giving us your insights and your time. And yeah, we look forward to following the story next year. And yeah, hopefully conferences go ahead, your big plans all come to fruition. And yeah, we wait with bated breath for what's coming.
Thank you, Mark. And I hope to see you in the flesh sooner rather than later as well.
Yeah, well, if 2022 allows, one of your big two is on the to-do list for myself personally.
Excellent. Well, thank you guys, and thank you for having me.
Thanks, Chris.